Season 2, Episode 4 of A View from the Left Side is a compilation of legislative updates recorded between February 7, 2022 and February 16, 2022. They range in topics from Republican attempts to block the COVID vaccine from school vaccine lists to raising the education spending limit and Black History Month. Republican bill blocks COVID vaccines from K-12 school vaccine list. Recorded February 7, 2022. The House Health and Human Services Committee meeting today in the afternoon. The most controversial bill on our agenda was from Representative Joanne Osborne, who chairs the committee. I applaud Representative Osborne for bringing this up and allowing us to debate it fully on video for all to see. But I'm disappointed that she even proposed this bill. Basically, this bill adds the COVID-19 vaccine to the vaccine list that schools are not allowed to mandate in order to attend class. For the most part, the vaccinations that kids are required to have to attend school keep the school safe and keep the kids safe. So there are things for like measles or chickenpox. These are diseases that spread rapidly among young children. So Osborne and the Republicans are saying COVID is not a childhood disease, and so it should not be on the list. Well, the thing is, COVID-19 is a disease that will spread rapidly through a school if there are enough unvaccinated kids there. The Republicans said this was all about fear and parent choice. Parents are afraid of the vaccine. The kids don't want the vaccine. This is causing so much fear in the populace, so we just have to take the vaccine out of the equation for small children. Multiple Republicans said small kids don't need it anyway because they don't get that sick. I did a point of order on that because I have two little granddaughters who are too young to get the COVID-19 vaccine. They were very, very sick for 2 to 3 weeks in December with COVID-19. The idea that children don't get sick is BS as far as I'm concerned. So I tried to correct them that, although they kept repeating the mantra that kids don't get that sick, so they should just shake it off. Just shake off COVID, that'd be fine. So I tried to say that as the legislature, we should not just be concerned about parental choice, we should also be concerned about public health. There has to be a balance between social responsibility and individual choice, in my opinion. I said, we needed to look at the data. For example, Arizona is one of the worst states in the country for COVID deaths. We're like right up there in the top 2 or 3. And one of the Republicans said, we're not talking about COVID, we're talking about the vaccine. Well, how can you talk about the vaccine without talking about the effect of the vaccine? It's obvious that most of the people who are dying from COVID are not vaccinated. Just a little bit of a reality check for the state of Arizona and the United States as a country. In Arizona, more than 26,000 people have died from COVID-19. Almost 2 million cases of COVID-19 in a state that only has like 7 million people. We're not a big state population-wise. Across the country, nationally, currently, 2,600 deaths per day from COVID. There have been more than 900,000 deaths from COVID in the United States. We're really one of the worst countries for death, considering how much vaccine access we had. Unfortunately, too many people don't want to get the vaccine. Also, nationally, over 76 million cases of COVID. The idea that the Republicans want to stop the parental fear of the vaccine and ignore the death rates and the astronomical case rates for the COVID is silly, in my opinion. We need to look at COVID-19 and the pandemic. They're saying that eliminating the vaccine from school regulations is going to reduce fear of the school children and the parents. And I took issue with that. Those little kids probably won't die from COVID. They might get really sick. They're probably not going to die. But you know who's going to die? Their parents, their grandparents, their family members, their friends. This is going to strike fear in the hearts of those little children. The idea that taking the vaccine out of the list of things that have to be given to school children, that's not the source of fear. People are afraid of this disease. They want to get back to some sort of normalcy where they can see see their friends. Where COVID is going to be with us because we have not managed the disease properly. There's going to be rolling variants. There's going to be more death. But let's keep the children safe and let's think about public health rather than parents who are misinformed about a vaccine. I am the most independent voting Democrat in AZ House. Here's why. Recorded February 8, 2022. Today's video is a little different from the others because it doesn't specifically focus on a bill or a situation in the House right now. It's more about the culture of the Arizona legislature. When I first ran for office in 2015, I said that I was going to look at every bill and determine how it benefited the people of Arizona, and if it didn't have broad benefit for the people of Arizona, then I didn't see a reason to support it. And so that has brought me to being the most independent voting Democrat in the Arizona House and perhaps in the Arizona legislature. It's not that I'm being contrary, it's that I'm sticking to my values. And what I've found when I look across my no votes or yes votes is that I'm primarily voting against favoritism. I'm voting against picking winners and losers. This is something you hear people on both sides of the aisle talking about. We don't want to pick winners and losers. A lot of the carve-outs for developers are picking winners and losers. The tax giveaway bills, I have voted against every tax giveaway of any type. Tax credits, tax cuts, tax breaks, tax exemptions. There's a whole lot of different types of tax giveaways. I've voted against all of them because for the most part, those are about picking winners and losers. These are about giving multinational corporations like Intel and Raytheon tax breaks while we ignore maternal and child health in the state of Arizona, while we ignore public education in the state of Arizona. So I don't think we need those tax breaks. This year, the couple that are going across the committees that I have are a tax break for people who own airplanes. Because the airplanes have gone up in value, they think they should pay less in taxes. Hey, if you can afford an airplane, I think you can afford to pay the taxes on it. Another one is a tax break for people who own guns. That's a carve out. You know, we don't all own guns. And how does that benefit the state of Arizona? And in fact, actually, having a carve out for gun ownership, I would think hurts the state of Arizona and would end up with more gun violence. The other thing that I consistently vote against are carve outs for specific corporations. A couple of years ago, Representative Kern had a bill that would have forced us to buy license plates more often, whether we wanted them or needed them, or wanted to change the design. So why was that? Because 3M wanted to sell us some more reflective coating, and if we got license plates more often, they would get a better profit. We have carve-outs like that for all the time. The other thing that I vote against consistently is the license plate bills. That is favoritism. That is sending money to designated charities through a state system of buying license plates. Why those specific charities? Why that teen center? Why that museum? Why that nonprofit? When there are lots of nonprofits and lots of causes that are worthy. Why? Because that nonprofit connected with a legislator who proposed a bill. And that's favoritism. I'm sorry. I know that Democrats and Republicans both proposed a license plate bills, but I don't think that they're fair and that there should be more transparency and accountability in those. Empowerment scholarships and vouchers, I always vote against those. Also favoritism. The number of schools that actually benefit from the empowerment scholarships and the student tuition organizations is so small. I can tell you that it's overwhelmingly religious schools. And so why are we funneling state funds to religious schools? I believe in separation of church and state, and I don't think that we should connect the connected. Results-based funding, another education issue. Why are we rewarding the rich schools and demonizing the poor schools? Why don't we fund the poor schools? That would be more broad-based funding. Privatization, that also hurts the people and usually raises cost. Anti-union bills and pro-gig economy bills, those hurt workers. So over and over and over again, if you look at these issues in the Arizona legislature, it's not hard to pick out the ones that are benefiting the people of Arizona and the ones that are benefiting select groups who have enough money to hire a lobbyist. AZ House raises education spending limit. Recorded February 8, 2022.
After today, the Arizona legislature has only 21 days to increase or repeal the aggregate expenditure limit. The AEL is an archaic and capricious limit that was placed on education funding more than 40 years ago. I'm sure we can all agree that our lives have changed dramatically since 1980. Why would we expect education funding needs to stand still in a changing world? Why should the legislature increase or repeal the AEL? Because the legislature should keep its promises to students, parents, and schools. The legislature appropriated these funds to the school systems. Increasing the AEL would allow the schools to spend the money that the legislature already appropriated. The legislature promised the 5 school districts in LD9 close to $100 million. If the legislature fails to act, Tucson Unified School District would lose $58 million. Marana would lose $15 million. Amphitheater, $14 million. Catalina Foothills, $6 million. And Flowing Wells, $5.8 million. What kind of message is the legislature sending to parents and students when we don't keep our promises? Failure to increase or repeal the aggregate expenditure limit would force schools to reduce staff and cut programs that they have already planned and budgeted for. The current AEL situation reminds me of the classic Peanuts cartoon where Lucy repeatedly whisks the football away as the trusting Charlie Brown tries to kick it. Lucy is obviously the legislature. Education funding is obviously a political football, and poor Charlie Brown is the trusting public waiting for us to do the right thing. Let's not disappoint the people of Arizona by playing politics with our students' futures. The AEL has been raised 3 times in the legislature on a bipartisan vote. If we value future generations and want to create a stronger Arizona, it's time to come together to abolish the AEL and to appropriately fund public education. Thank you.
African American leader calls out critical race theory in AZLeg. Recorded February 10, 2022. It's still African American History Month, and today we had a special program for African American Protocol Day. This is a day when African American leaders come to the legislature and talk with us about the African American community in the state of Arizona, what their needs are, and the things that they would like us to pass or not pass. So it was very good. The featured speaker was Dr. Edmund Baker, and he talked about equitable versus equal health care. And I thought that was very interesting. What he was mostly talking about was if somebody has, let's say, the same diagnosis and they're getting the same drug for that diagnosis, why do some people have different outcomes? Well, a lot of people have different outcomes because they are suffering discrimination, they are suffering from poverty, they don't have equal access, maybe they don't have a car, maybe they missed their doctor's appointment. So there's lots of reasons where people have worse outcomes, and it has nothing to do with their actual health diagnosis, but it has to do with racial and sexual discrimination in the system. So I thought he made some very good points. The other person who spoke, who's very impactful, was Clovis Campbell Jr. He is the publisher of the Arizona Informant, which is an African-American newspaper founded by his dad, and it's been around a long time. And he's also the executive director of the Arizona Commission of African-American Affairs. And so he gave a very direct and pointed speech, and he alluded to Governor Doug Ducey's State of the State address and talked about how that was encouraging to him, but now the legislature has gone on sort of a bad path. And you know what he's referring to, don't you? He's referring to the bills that we are hearing regarding critical race theory. We have 2 different bills that I know of. There might be more, but there are 2 different ones that have passed across my desk. And one of them is HCR 2001 from Representative Kaiser. It's a sweeping bill that would go to the voters and basically ban critical race theory and talking bad about different groups and basically tamp down speech not only in schools and universities but workplaces. We need to know the truth, and we need to be able to discuss racism and sexism openly in the schools and in the workplace. And so HCR 2001 is a really bad idea, and hopefully it won't get to the voters, but that looks like where it's headed. A companion bill, which is specifically about teaching in K through 12 schools, is HB 2112 from Representative Michelle Udall. Now, this critical race theory didn't actually pass last year, but it was one of those things that was stuffed into the budget. So this says that we can't talk about topics with malice or calling them wrong behaviors, something like that. So, slavery was a bad thing. We should be able to call it out as a bad thing. The multiple ways that Black people were oppressed in the United States, that's a bad thing. And we need to realize that racism and sexism are baked into our laws, and then we need to change those laws, not skirt the issue with laws like 2001 and 2112. This would skirt the issue and shut down speech, and that's the wrong thing. We need to face our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There were some things like the Black Wall Street incident in Tulsa. I didn't know about that until recently, and I'm 70 years old. The story of the Underground Railroad in Ohio. I took Ohio history. I didn't really know the extent of the Underground Railroad action right there in Lorain County where I grew up. The Holocaust. That was not taught in my school. I didn't know about the Holocaust until I was a sophomore at Ohio State, and I saw the slides go up in history class, and I'm like, wait, what is he talking about? We need to trust our teachers and trust our students with the truth, and then let them decide on how to take our country forward rather than tamping down speech and hiding the bad parts of our history that we would rather not talk about. More guns in schools and on campuses won't make anyone safer. Recorded February 15, 2022. There's been a lot of talk in the Arizona legislature about how to keep kids safe in school. Unfortunately, the Republicans' big idea on safety is more guns. Of course, more guns. That keeps everybody safe, right? So I have a long list of bad ideas from the Republicans on more guns in K through 12 schools and on college campuses. This is not going to make our kids safer. First on the list is HB 2414 from Representative Parker. A few years ago, we had a bill that allowed people to have unloaded guns in their glove compartments on school grounds. Now, Representative Parker says those guns in the glove compartments can be loaded. What could go wrong? Somebody gets pissed off inside the school, goes out, gets their loaded gun, and goes back into the school. That's not going to keep anybody safer. Another is HB 2448 from Representative Wynn. This is mandatory gun training in public school. Why are we doing this? We don't even have mandatory sex education. Representative Huffman has a bill about explicit material, HB 2495. We can't show a kid how to put a condom on a banana in sex ed class. Why are we going to teach them how to shoot a gun? I think this is a terrible idea, and there should be an opt-out if it ever gets into the school. Next, we have 2489. This is a bill from Representative Wilmoth. This gives provisional concealed carry licenses to people who are 18 to 21 years old. So in the Health Committee, we have had a lot of talk about how dangerous marijuana, tobacco, nicotine, vaping, and alcohol are for people who are between 18 and 21 years old. If they're not mature enough to smoke a joint, how are they mature enough to carry a concealed weapon? Yes, I know we have 18 to 21-year-olds in the military going to war. Well, I don't think we should have them going to war either, because if anything's going to screw up your brain, going to war is going to screw up your brain because you're going to come back with PTSD. So, not a good idea. Next, we have 2447. This is from Representative Wynn again. This allows people to carry guns on campus, college campuses. I also think that's a bad idea. I did a previous video on that one. And lastly, we have 2610. This allows for transfer of a big game hunting license to a Gold Star child. A Gold Star family is a family that's lost a loved one in military combat. We're going to take a kid who could even be under 14 years old, who is depressed and stressed out because he's lost a family member to guns and the military, and we're going to give that kid a big game hunting permit, and it's essentially a gun to go with that permit, right? What could go wrong? Why aren't we giving that kid counseling? Why aren't we sending him to camp to help him put his life back together? Giving him a big game hunting permit so he can take out his frustrations and his anger on animals in the woods. I don't think that's a great idea. This is just a handful of the bad gun bills that are going through the legislature. More guns don't make us safer. Republicans plan to expand school vouchers again. Recorded February 16, 2022. We just finished the Ways and Means Committee meeting. It's not a very long agenda today, but we did have one very contentious bill, and that was HB 2803. Initially, this bill by Representative Fillmore with a co-sponsor of Representative Blackman, initially this was broad expansion of the Empowerment Scholarship Program. You'll remember that in 2018, over 1 million Arizona voters said no to Prop 305. They said no to expansion of government money going to private schools or home schools with no evaluation and no accountability. Obviously, the Republicans did not listen to the voters because repeatedly they have proposed expansion of empowerment scholarships in the legislature. The Fillmore-Blackman bill would have blown the doors open and opened empowerment scholarships to everybody and pretty much broken the bank of the general fund and the public schools. Chairwoman Bullock had a strike everything on that bill and said that empowerment scholarships should go to children who are victimized or bullied at school or near school, and that within 15 days of the alleged incident that they could move to another school or move to homeschooling or move to micro schools or neighborhood pods with an empowerment scholarship. What's wrong with that idea? Well, first of all, the empowerment scholarship program has no accountability and no evaluation. It was designed to be not evaluated. So we actually don't know how well kids are doing with those empowerment scholarships, and that was by design. This is a big leap of faith that a kid is going to be safer in one school versus another school. Look at what's going on worldwide with the Catholic Church. Thousands of children have been victimized over decades by the Catholic Church. And so many of these scholarships go to religious schools, Catholic schools, Jewish schools, and other religious schools. Why would we assume that those kids are going to be safer there? There's no data. There's no accountability. It's a leap of faith. On the other hand, what we're ignoring is that bullies are usually victims also. A child is not born bad. A child is not born a bully. A child learns to be a bully, usually at home. So what's going on with that kid? We're not addressing that part of the equation at all. The other thing we're not addressing in this bill is that schools could be safer if we had more school nurses, more school counselors, more support for teachers and students, if we actually had a safe space in schools. But the way the state has treated public schools is an abomination, in my opinion. We have cut budgets, we have victimized schools, victimized certain groups of students. Rich schools are awarded, poor schools are demonized. And so we do not have a level playing field in this state, and this bill is not going to make that playing field level. The other thing I'd like to point out is that 2803 is model legislation from the American Legislative Exchange Council. It is not something that Representative Bullock wrote by herself with her husband, as she alluded to in committee. It is a model bill from a national organization that is banking on shutting down public schools and making money on education. This is a bad bill. I voted no. There's no accountability. We don't know that kids will be safer. And so why are we doing this? We should be making schools safe, and we should be helping the victims and the bullies, because bullies are victims too. The story of the Underground Railroad and the Oberlin Rescuers for Black History Month, recorded February 2nd, 2022.
Representative Powers Hannley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I rise for a comment regarding Black History Month.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Today I bring you the story of the town that started the Civil War. The town of Oberlin and Oberlin College were founded together in 1833 as a Christian perfectionist society. It was the town 10 miles from sin. Unlike neighboring small towns, Oberlin strove to be egalitarian. Blacks and women were accepted to Oberlin College from day one. The residents studied together, worked together in the fields, worshiped together, and kept a strict diet with no alcohol, caffeine, or fancy foods. Two families from my family tree, the Lymans and the Powerses, moved from Massachusetts to Oberlin in the early days. It didn't take long for Oberlin to establish itself as a bastion of liberal thought. In 1835, the Oberlin Anti-Slavery Society was founded, and one of the charter members was a Lyman. By 1858, the Oberlinians had been helping escaped slaves reach the shallow waters of Lake Erie for more than 20 years by running the Underground Railroad in northern Ohio. Since the former slaves followed the bright North Star, Oberlinians hung star quilts and put candles in the windows to mark the safe houses and the route north. The people of Oberlin believed that slavery was against the will of God, and they were on a mission to end it. Tent revival preachers like Oberlin College President Charles Graniston Finney taught the spiritual egalitarianism of the Second Great Awakening of Christianity. Unfortunately, federal law gave slave owners the right to come into free states like Ohio and reclaim their property, the escaped slaves. In September 15, 1858, federal marshals from Kentucky captured former slave John Price, who had been living and working in Oberlin as a free man. The marshals tied up Price and took him south to Wellington to catch the train. Ansel Lyman passed them on the road and heard John Price's calls for help. When Lyman got back to Oberlin, he told the residents of the capture. The villagers rose up to defend the former slave. They used every horse and buggy in town and went south to Wellington to rescue him. A group of black and white lawyers and college professors tried to negotiate his release. They said Ohio's free state constitution superseded the federal law. This might sound familiar. They also said that slavery was against their religion. Reason didn't work. The Oberlin rescuers recaptured Price, and he fled to Canada. President James Buchanan was not pleased.
15 seconds.
A federal grand jury indicted 37 black and white men who were lawyers, college professors, and students, including Ansel Lyman. They were jailed in federal prison in Cleveland for 6 months. The Oberlin rescuers became world famous thanks to the Telegraph and a network of anti-slavery societies. Their saga enlightened people to the evils of slavery and the power of pushback. 2 years later, the Civil War started.
That's your time. Thank you, Representative Powers Hannley.
Thanks so much for tuning in to A View from the Left Side today. If you enjoyed the show, please consider liking this podcast on social media and becoming a subscriber. This is Representative Pam Powers Hannley signing off. Until next time, please take care of yourself, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.